Welcome to Virtually Unbreakable Podcast, where we inspire you to live happier and more fulfilling lives. My name is Ella, and I'm your host. Today, my guest is Sam Holland. Sam is a multidisciplinary maker who is committed to making sustainable work. Sam is a theatre director, an illustrator, and materials developer. And she is someone who describes herself as being very lucky to having the opportunity to work across multidisciplines and use creativity and imagination in all of her work. And today our topic is how to create a business that truly serves your values and how to use imagination at work. I'm pleased to have you here today, so sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. Sam, it's so nice to see you today. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. It's lovely. Thank you for inviting me to talk with you today. Yeah, it's a beautiful day finally.
Yes, it's very sunny here as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a nice day.
I'm based in Wiltshire. It was ridiculous weather yesterday. It was hail, storms, thunder,
wow,
rain. Anyway, it was quite dramatic. But,
wow, yeah, what a difference a day makes, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Anyway, I'm happy to be here. So
great, wonderful. Well, Sam, we will talk about actually a number of different topics today, I hope. But let's start perhaps with a short introduction with regards to your business. So you are, like I said in my earlier introduction, you work across multidisciplines. You've been very lucky to having had that opportunity, and you are now founder and a director of a loan project. Can you tell me a little bit more about what is Loan Project and what inspired you to start your own business?
Yes, so Loan Project was something that really kind of came out of forming lots of ideas during lockdown. I think like a lot of us, particularly those of us who've kind of got lots of ideas and are trying to kind of busily forge our way in the world. Loan Project was a way of me trying to fuse some of the work I'd been doing with new materials through a company that I founded with my husband, Humphrey, called Sense, and also combine that with a lot of the work that I did in the arts. And so the basis of it was going to be creating sustainable pieces of theatre, making sure that any of the actors or designers that were involved were locally based to make a kind of sustainable group of people, but also to make sure that the way in which the theatre itself, the work that was made, had a sustainable agenda and philosophy behind it. And the reason for the word loam is that loam is sort of like the perfect growing conditions in soil, and I wanted to provide a space that was an incubator where people could come, create ideas, and use all sorts of different methodologies and techniques, mostly using theatre techniques, to have the freedom to develop ideas. I do a lot of work with character half masks, and that's an extraordinary useful tool, because once somebody knows how to work with a character half mask, it frees them up mentally, physically. It creates a kind of almost sort of trance-like state where people discover very, very rapidly they have access to being creative in a way that they didn't think was possible. It's really interesting to do that kind of work with non-actors, because suddenly people who've been terribly shy and worried about speaking publicly put on a character half mask, develop a character, and suddenly they're free. And I think that my work in the theatre, whenever I try and apply that, I kind of apply it naturally to any environment I'm in, because I guess, like all of us, you're able to do well or have confidence in what you know well. And I guess I'm also probably guilty of applying the stuff I know in a rather random way to stuff that wouldn't have had that applied to it. And because I'm not that bothered about breaking the rules, because I don't often know what the rules are.
Well, you are a true innovator at heart, so you're completely forgiven.
Thank you.
That's what innovators do. They create their own rules. They break the the rules that are, commonly applicable throughout society, that are often outdated and don't work very well for everyone, and create new environments and new products and new ways of living. It's very refreshing, actually, to hear. And Sam, you are one of the winners for of the UK Women in Innovation Award. Congratulations. What has winning that award meant for you and your business?
Well, firstly, it was, what was wonderful about it was that it meant that I was able to connect with another bunch of women who, all of them are quite extraordinary. And I've made quite a few friends during the course of the program, and it meant that we could kind of discuss some of the issues that we faced, particularly often as women in business. And a number of us were working in quite traditionally male-dominated roles. And I work with a lot of wonderful men. And I'm married to a very wonderful man who I partner in business with. But I was aware over time, as the business that we developed together grew, that I was very rarely in a room with other women, particularly in the boardroom. And having that group of other female innovators and business women to talk to was really lovely. It was like a place that we could download and say, you never guess what happened today. And then, another part of the cohort would say, no, that happens all the time. But then more crucially, what can we do about it? And there was a wonderful woman who we also met. We had a bunch of mentors that were part of that program. And she has a platform called Women on Boards. And again, it sort of reiterated to me the importance that unless you have a good balance within a boardroom, which unfortunately, whether we like it or not, in a lot of corporate businesses is the place where the high level decisions get made. I always think everyone should be in the boardroom, but that doesn't happen. But at least find a kind of gender balance within the room. So that was one of the really useful things about it. It also gives you a good platform to talk. It gets you used to having these sorts of conversations because you have to filter and consolidate your thoughts quite precisely, so that out of respect more than anything else, if you've got a sort of 15-minute slot to talk about something, then you kind of owe it to the people watching to make sure that you're sort of clear about what you want to say. And I think that goes back to theatre training in a way, in that you have a limited finite period of time to develop an idea in quite a complex way and deliver something that tells a story really, really clearly. And for our business, it enabled us to really push the message of the importance of sustainable materials and sustainable composites in particular. The composites industry is sustainable, offers sustainability automatically through the light weighting of products. However, typically the materials that are used to make those lightweight products are very energy intensive, use very intensive manufacturing methods, such as products like carbon fiber and glass fiber. And so returning to more natural fibers and bio-based resin systems, it was just seemed to be the right thing to do. It felt good. And so that program, which was all about really sustainable materials in aero interiors, was great. And it also enabled me to go back to my old school and talk to the students there at the moment about the importance of not thinking that you're someone who specializes in STEM subjects or art subjects, but there is there's always a way to combine the two. And that even if you don't end up in a career in either science or the arts, it's important to have that as part of your toolkit in life. and not to kind of do this
Yes.
early, but to keep on doing that.
Yes. And I think absolutely you hit the nail on the head. I could not agree more. I think we're all guilty at times. I think especially when we are stressed out or tired, or you know, some of us actually, I spoke about this yesterday at a business breakfast. Some of us are going through burnout recovery or helping our partners go through burnout recovery. And that's when it's really difficult to see things from the multidisciplinary approach and being open, right, to others people's perspectives and learning from them and so on. But we're not talking about that. So is it the aerospace industry specifically that you're working on now, or do you have other projects as well as part of this business that you have with your husband?
Yeah, no, we're the Aerospace Interiors, we've sort of put a sort of pause on it because we got very interested in other sustainable in finding industries whereby the uptake of sustainable fibers was more readily accessible. And we found that actually interiors, design interiors of buildings, or working with architects was actually a much more a sort of faster track way of getting that material used and into buildings. And yes, so we still work on that together. We still have connections with aerospace, but my partner Humphrey is always coming up with new products. He's an extraordinary person, Hump. And on top of that, my daughter, I have three wonderful daughters, one of whom, Tabby, is a young innovator. Actually, she won the Young Innovator Award a couple of years ago, and she's developed an upcycling company called Reconsidered that takes waste fabrics or old clothes that you don't wear anymore, or even duvet covers or curtains, and turns them into extraordinary collections that she designs. And Humphrey has been working with Tabby on taking some of those waste fabrics, and she's made a range of beautiful bio-based resin and scrap fabric earrings that are going to be. She worked with the V&A recently on their backing material that they have for costumes, and they sent her a whole pile of their waste fabric, and there's a beautiful collection of jewelry that's going to be at the V&A. So we're working on those projects too, and all of it really it connects up with. I guess that's what happens maybe that's why we ended up together, and that we both are quite restless people. Yeah, and we have lots of ideas, and we're always trying to put those. I guess it gives us peace of mind to put those ideas into something practical. Yeah. We'd always much rather roll up our sleeves and try something than worry too much about whether or not it's not a good idea. And that brings with it its own problems. And it also, we have to be careful because we're always thinking about stuff. We have to remind ourselves sometimes to just stop. So that burnout that we were talking about earlier, I've definitely experienced that. We all have. Tabby had experienced it. And being in a household of people who have always kind of known that we have to make the work to earn the money, I guess, rather than sort of be in a more usual world, which is that
rather than show your face somewhere, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Meetings for meeting's sake make me very, very cross. And I've seen that happen a lot. And I guess what being a maker does is that you're a bit more existentialist about it. And I guess you take on sometimes you take on too much responsibility. Yeah. And one of the big lessons I learned in business was that I had to sometimes let stuff slip, because if I was always there ready to try or felt that it was my responsibility to be there to catch everything, then there would always be a way of making some kind of reparation for something that fundamentally might not have been the best approach. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so letting the gaps appear and letting the problems bubble up and stepping back also, when you're working with a team of people, enables the people you're working with to solve those problems. And then
it helps your mental health.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So let's maybe jump to that topic for a second. So you've had extraordinary experience and across different disciplines, like you're saying, and you're someone that uses creativity every single day. Tell me, what are the three biggest lessons you've learned about yourself and your mental health on your entrepreneurial journey?
I think the first one's probably very much connected to what I just spoke about kind of stepping back and not feeling that you have to take responsibility for everything, because if it's not good for you, it's not good for your mental health, and it also quite crucially doesn't help the person that you're actually trying to help. I think I've always been a bit like this, so maybe it's not something I learned particularly on the business journey, but I think it applies, and that's to be prepared. Because if you can over prepare without beating yourself up about it, but if you haven't prepared something to bring into the room, you can't then just let it go. You end up sort of improvising wildly, ad-libbing without knowing why you're doing what you're doing, and it's just a way of kind of getting away with it. I hate that kind of premise when someone says, "Oh, got away with that." There's always a bit of me that thinks, well, okay, we all do that in life. We all get away with stuff. But if you spend your life just kind of winging it, I think you end up being more anxious because A, you probably will get found out somewhere along the line. B, you haven't really given yourself time to think about why you're doing what you're doing and how you're doing it and what effect it's having on other people. And again, I think that comes back to what we were talking about earlier, is that if you go out and you listen to people and you try and get a communication going, rather than thinking, okay, what's important to me and how do people view me, then everything becomes directed back on yourself, so that subsequently when you are in an environment with a lot of other people, you're not able to kind of understand how to riff with them, but you kind of, I feel you have to sort of earn the permission to be able to riff with them by taking the time to do your own work, and then be able to sit back and listen to what they bring to the table.
Totally. I think all of us could do with a little bit of education about relationships. And I don't just mean romantic relationships, but relationships and working with others. It's an area that we can always improve in, because people are so complex, and they bring that complexity to their workplace, to their companies. They put that, you can see that in their perception of the world and their ideas and so on. So being curious, I think taking a step back and forgetting about yourself for a minute, when interacting with another person, actually being curious about them and their perspective, is actually very simple but very successful approach in conflict resolution. And it's something I'm talking about in my in the book that I'm writing at the moment, Looking for Love. It's so simple. We often get in, people sometimes trigger us, which is something that sometimes we can't avoid. But when that happens, it's important to develop that emotional maturity, to take a deep breath, to take a step back, or completely leave the space, of course, if you're completely agitated, but take a step back and wonder, what is it about what I'm saying that is triggering the other person, and what do they need from me the most right now? Why? Because often people act the way they act because they have a reason to act that way.
Yeah.
It might be that we are giving them not enough of something or too much of something.
Yes,
A relationship is like a dance between two people. It's not us. It's not all about us, and we think the other person is bad, so they must be bad. And it's less about us, and it's more about what happens in between two people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that communication is something that we can always improve in whatever job we are in, wherever we work or live globally. It's something I'm really passionate about. It's interesting to hear your perspective on that. And it's so simple, and it's something we forget doing so often, maybe because to get there, we also need to develop a sense of self-acceptance and self-compassion. So actually, it's very hard to love others when we don't love ourselves. And it's very difficult to accept somebody else the way they are if we can't accept who we are truly, and not being harsh on yourself. So developing that inner positive inner voice, supportive inner voice, is something that really helps in business as well, because suddenly you're becoming less judgmental, you're becoming open-minded, curious to learn, and so on. Fantastic topic. We are slightly moving away from what we originally wanted to discuss, but yeah, very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. You've mentioned before, when we spoke about Innovate UK and the award you won, about connecting with other women and realizing that having the platform to share perhaps some of your struggles and discuss the solutions you came up with, and just bond and make friends. What was the role? What is your view on building support network in business, especially as a woman?
Yeah, I think it's super important. I think it's important within business, but it's also important with outside business. And I think maybe in many ways even more important to have someone that you can kind of download to. That's maybe not connected to your business, because then inevitably they have a different perspective on it. And if they're an old friend who knows you really well, and you know them, there's no barrier to, you can just get on the phone to them, or you can WhatsApp and say, help, I'm having a nightmare, and they're there for you. And I got very ill last year. I got sepsis and was in hospital for a long time, and just having, and my friends, my tribe, few of my very, very best friends, 2 women who I've known since I was at drama school. So we've known each other a long time. With my family, made videos for me that they sent me every week, to just funny, ridiculous, silly videos, just so that I didn't have to think about what was, but that's hospital and not business. And you asked me a different question, so I should answer the question you asked me. I think it's very important, if you can, to employ a balance of, again, a gender balance in the workplace. And one thing that was very clear was that when we managed to increase the amount of women at C-Sense on the shop floor, the levels of the productivity went up, the communications improved, and the workplace was a lot more organized. And you could see that what was wonderful was seeing how what might have been traditionally considered to be a male dominated workshop suddenly there was a much greater sense of family. So does that sort of answer your question?
Sort of, yes. But I want to ask another question on the back of that. So, well, maybe can you tell me what is your biggest conclusion when it comes to building support network? Is it important, for example, to surround yourself with right people and be a little specific and maybe a little picky who you're surrounding yourself with, especially when you building or growing your business? Has that been your experience?
Yes, it is, because if you're growing a new business, inevitably you will end up bumping up against people who you will, whether you like it or not, have nothing in common with, and they will have nothing in common with you. They might like the idea or the germ of whatever the kernel of what the business is about, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have any desire to communicate with you on a social basis. And that's difficult. That's really hard, because in my book, the way I approach a business meeting is to have a conversation. It's not about it, and it also has to have something a bit more nuanced than it just being a set of instructions or goals.
Of course.
It can't always just be about process. You have to understand why you're choosing that process and what the repercussions of that are, and what effect that has on the people. People management is a massive part of managing a business, and I think that sadly it is too often consigned to, oh, that's something the HR department deals with. Every manager and every person in that, whatever your business is, all have to be able to communicate together on multiply nuanced levels.
Correct.
So yes, that is difficult. And I think that one of the solutions I found to that was that when I found somebody who I did have a connection to and found an ease, who I guess I felt I got them and they got me a bit, I just held on to them. I held on to them as tightly as I could and let them go. I mean, Sophie Walker, I'm sure she won't mind me mentioning her name, who has an extraordinary company called Disposal, who's one of that innovation cohort. Very much when I met Sophie, we were able to talk so easily and freely that I was determined to keep her in my life, and I hope she doesn't mind. So I think that's important, because when you're having difficult times and you're in a room of people that nothing seems to be landing,
and sorry, can I just
another group of people who remind you of what you're doing that actually does work, and how much you kind of, the love you have for each other, the respect you have for each other, I guess kind of helps you to maintain the levels of self-confidence that you need, particularly as a woman in a boardroom, so that you don't just crumble. Because there are times when you just want to just cry, but you can't, because it just doesn't, it looks really unprofessional. And you know,
which is another problem, right? But in itself. Last question, because we're coming to the end of the time, I realize. What would be your advice to anyone who wants to create a business that is truly in line with their values?
I would say that you should find something that makes you that makes you fulfilled in some way. It's not about, obviously a business has to be successful, and the judge of most businesses' success is what their profit margin is. But I think if you don't understand why you're doing what you're doing, and if you don't, I tell you, that's water is coming down through my pipes upstairs, so there might be quite a funny noise going on.
Oh, don't worry, it's fine.
If you don't understand why you're doing what you're doing, and you don't think that it's a valid thing to do, then if you're given the opportunity to not take that approach, and it not only be about being successful financially, I think it's crucial. I think understanding why is really key, and the why can't be because it makes loads of money. The why needs to be something that you are, because if you're enthusiastic about it and you know that it's making some kind of positive impact, on other people, then you're more likely to be able to get other people to buy into your vision.
Absolutely.
And you're more likely to have a happy, successful team. And I think having a successful team and a successful business is about having a bunch of people who are excited to turn up to work, to the workplace or space, whatever that might be, every day, excited to be with that bunch of people and excited about the ideas that will be generated, and whatever that end product is, whether it be an aeroplane seat back or a piece of theatre. It doesn't really matter what it is. The important thing is having that sense of, I guess it's a sense of community and enthusiasm and continual learning and curiosity. That's what I think.
Actually, I love your answer. I could not think of a better answer myself. I think I would actually answer it in a very similar way. The why, knowing the why is crucial, and the why has to be big enough for us, for the company founder, to make an impact. Because when the why is big enough, you're becoming more influential, people buy in from you, like you said, you're making bigger impact, and you are better positioned to sell to your team and keep them motivated, right? Every day. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I really enjoyed talking to you, Sam, today. Thank you so much for joining us. If any of you is interested in Sam's work or her experience, I will include the link to her LinkedIn profile in the show notes. And in the meantime, I wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you, Ella.